Sheikh, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are we doing today?
Happy.
Happy?
Yes, very
Why?
nice occasion, very beautiful occasion.
Good. For the benefit of my guests, I guess we want to make this personal as well as spiritual as well as knowledgeable. So I guess the first thing we'd really like to do is to find out a bit about you in terms of your background, in terms of your history, and really I've listed a couple of questions supported by yourself as well. So I guess my first question to you, Sheikh, is what is it about Islam that made you become Muslim?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think the time I became Muslim was a time when the history or the effect of Islam, the influence of Islam in the West was something that was being newly discovered. As part of the general awakening of the African Americans to the situation in America, what we realized is that Muslims had a very long history of resistance in the West. I don't know if a lot of people know, but the first revolution that took place in the West was the Haitian Revolution against the French. At that time, the French were what you would call a superpower at the time. And these were slaves that overthrew the French military in Haiti and took over the country. This revolution was a very, very important one because when Napoleon sent other French troops to defeat them, they defeated those troops as well. The inspiration of this revolution was Islam. There were many Muslim Africans who had led that revolution and who had inspired that revolution. Then we find out that even long before Columbus came to America, Muslims had come to America before Columbus. Many of these Muslims were Muslims from Mali. And there's in the historical records of Columbus that when the Spaniards were fighting all the Indians and massacring all the Indians, they said they came upon some very dark Indians who dressed like Muslims, who gave them the fight of their lives. These were the descendants of those Muslim explorers that came over from Mali. So Islam has a very, very long history in America, and it is because of the rise in that knowledge that I became a Muslim.
Were they more in a similar position to yourselves?
Yes, it was a very national type of a movement, really. Yes.
Interesting. So, I mean, relating it back to the Prophet, once you did become a Muslim, did you see that those who were actually born Muslim, did they reflect the teachings of the Prophet once you had read upon Islam and the Prophet himself?
Well, yes and no. One of the things I think that stands out that's very impressive to Western people about Muslims is Muslim generosity. And this generosity and also their hospitality as well. Muslim hospitality, like for example, the heights of it one can see in the march, the Arba'in march between Najaf and Karbala. But they're impressed by Muslim hospitality, which goes back to the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa by Muslims' outward respect for women, for example. I say outwardly because it also reflects upon certain things that Muslims deviate from the path of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa. So you would find, for example, among Muslims, you would find many misogynists, for example. You find racism very, 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 very big among Muslims. You find a lot of negative things, like for example, untrustworthiness in business dealings, for example.
And did you see that the Muslims were able to deal with those situations according to your perspective on this? How did the Muslims, those who were born Muslims,
yes,
were they living up to this?
I think the more knowledge of Islam that they have, and when we say knowledge, you mean knowledge in the full sense, not just getting the information, but being also able to live the information, being also to live those realities that you have learned. I think Muslims, when they do that, yes, they rise to the occasion. But I do think also sometimes, how much Islam you reflect has a lot to do with who you are on the inside, you know? If you have a lot of limitations on the inside, you know, you wouldn't reflect it so well.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, moving just a bit on in terms of the actual night, you know, we are celebrating the birth of a historical character, an Islamic historical character. Some sects within Islam see this as an innovation. We've heard the famous words of bid'ah, for example. What is Islam's actual take on celebrating the birth or even the death or commemorating the death of a certain historic personality within Islam?
Well, I think first of all, a bid'ah is a highly precise term. A bid'ah is when you call something, wajib or haram or mustahab or makruh. You give something that legal and spiritual almost criterion when there is no roots for it in the Holy Prophet's Sunnah, in Hadith, in Quran. This is bid'ah. You know, so for example, if I say that holding Milad Nabi is wajib, that's bid'ah, you know, or is mustahab, it's bid'ah, you know, from a legal point of view. All Muslims know that the Prophet didn't celebrate his birthday. All Muslims know that. So all Muslims know that they can't call it that and make it a bid'ah. Yeah. You see, you can't call it up as makruh or whatever. You know, they can't do this. Right. You see, that's one thing. The other thing is I think the attitude towards that is a very rigid attitude. I think it goes back to a false understanding of what we mean by sunnah.
Okay.
All right. I think we have two kinds of sunnah. We have the sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we have sunnah in the general sense, which is some kind of practice that you introduce to people that people follow after you.
Right. So it's not specific to the Prophet.
It's not specific to the Prophet. Okay. You know, this is a sunnah, and there's a very interesting hadith by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he says, if a person introduces a good sunnah and other people follow him on this, he will get the reward of their acting out of that sunnah, right? Which would not diminish the rewards that they get from it. In other words, he's saying that you can do a good deed that might not necessarily be in Quran or Hadith. You know, you can do a good deed, and if people follow that good deed and keep on doing that good deed, then, you would get rewarded for that. So, for example, a gathering like this is a good deed. You know, it increases our love for the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and because of this, we will get rewarded for this.
Okay, great. I mean, just moving on again in terms of the life of the Prophet. Of course, he was known in many titles: the trustworthy one, for example, the truthful one, mercy to mankind, and his birth came at a time of deep ignorance that in actual history. There's a term called for that ignorance as Ayyam al-Jahiliyyah, so the time of ignorance. So tell us about his character and his attributes that actually, you know, revived religion in the hearts of the people.
Well, first of all, he behaved in a very kind manner to people. He behaved in a very tolerant manner to people. He did not show fury and wrath to people. He never showed anger on that kind of a level. You know, there were times when he was angry, but he had it under control. We have the story of him going on tabligh, and somebody from their window would throw refuse upon him, rubbish upon him. And when he passed by and this man didn't do it, he inquired as to what happened to this guy. And he went inside to see him, and he was sick, and he prayed for him and so on. I think, when we interact with the community, when we interact with non-believers, on the basis of love and care and standing up for their rights and so forth, then non-believers start to like you. And when they start to like you, they start to like Islam. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that when he was younger, there was something that he was most proud about even now, and that was the Hilful Fudul, where him and a number of young men from Mecca decided to form a group to defend the rights of those people who did not have the support of a tribe, strangers in the society. Now, who were these young men? They were all mushrikeen. They were all mushrikeen, you know. You know, they weren't Muslims. He wasn't a prophet then, you see. But they had a sense of justice. You know, I think this is something that we can learn. We live in an environment where we have lots of mushrikeen. You know, and you have lots of social problems, you see. Social problems that the government, you know, the police, or other people do nothing about, you see. So we are getting to a point where people have to get together, you know, and try to solve their own problems. This is where Muslims could come in. You know, that very act itself is a prophetic act. Unfortunately, you find a lot of Muslims, especially Shias, I find, tend to marginalize themselves from the wider society. You see, and I think we actually impose upon ourselves a limitation, not being able to spread this beautiful madhab of ours in the society.
I see. I mean, Islam, I think on some final points now, Islam is usually known to be a very spiritual religion. I mean, especially when it comes to connecting with Islam, it's always very personal, it's very self-development, character building. There's not much about progress materially, or materialistically, as well as spiritually. So I mean, I guess my question is, I mean, what comments do you have about how Islam is a source of material and spiritual growth?
Well, I think if you look in history, for example, wherever a society became Islamic, they became both materially powerful and well off, and also spiritually, wherever you go. You know, if you go to Indonesia, for example, the Indonesians weren't originally Muslims. You find when Islam takes root there, you have a specific Indonesian Islamic civilization that grows up there. You know, if you find Islam, for example, going to Africa, you'd find specific Islamic civilizations growing up in Africa. Each civilization having its particular characteristics of the people and the environment in which it finds itself. In China, in India, in Iran, wherever you find Islam going, you know, you find a civilization. In other words, you find wealth, you find power, and you also find the growth of spirituality, Islamic law, irfan, and so forth. Right. So Islam is a civilizational and spiritualizing type of religion.
Brilliant. Just one last point. I mean, in terms of, based on your experiences of, you know, visiting different communities, what can we do to give a good experience of a prophetic example to our fellow citizens, especially within the UK?
Well, you know, the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was described as being the Quran in person, having the personality of the Quran, and I think it is something that is achievable by all of us to the extent that we can, in the sense that if we follow what the Holy Quran is telling us to do, and if we avoid what the Holy Quran tells us to avoid, and if we tolerate that which the Holy Quran tells us is good, but our culture tells us it's bad, our feelings tells us it's bad, you know, that we could control those things to conform to that particular personality that the Quran is trying to form of us. And then also to follow the sunnah of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which helps to even refine us even more. I think when we do this and we go out in the society, whether we're in a classroom or at work or on the street or in a store or whatever, that light will shine forth and people will be attracted to it.
Brilliant. Well, it's been an absolutely enlightening conversation with you. I really appreciate your time. Ladies and gentlemen, Sheikh Ahmed Haneef, we thank him for his presence with Allah. Salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.